Hello, welcome to the SoundWorks Collection video series. I'm Michael Coleman. This week, I'm excited to have supervising sound editor and sound designer Richard King and re-recording mixer Gary Rizzo, who recently collaborated with director Christopher Nolan on his latest science fiction action thriller film, Tenet. Tenet was released in September of 2019 and was the first major Hollywood release since the coronavirus pandemic started. It's now available on 4K Ultra HD, Blu-ray, DVD, and digital services, and if you haven't seen the film, you should definitely check it out, as today's discussion is going to cover many of the key plot points and exciting sound moments in the film. So first off, thank you guys so much for being here. I'd love to find out, when did you first get alerted that this was going to be Chris's next film?
Well, I was alerted when I read it in the trades, which is usually how I find out about these things. He likes to keep his projects under wraps until he's ready to go, and so I found out about it like that, and then was able to meet with him a few times when he was in pre-production here in LA on the Warner's lot, and have a few chats about, after I'd read the script, what the kind of what his thoughts were as related to sound, and how this notion of inversion of reverse entropy would how that would be related to sound. And we basically just batted around some ideas, and which were just first impression sort of ideas. And then he went off to shoot, and he was gone. He was out of the country for most of that year, and got back to California in later in the year, September or October, to do some shooting. And by that time I was beginning to get some recording done, and just from my notes that I had made when I was reading the script, what kind of sounds I thought I would need. So starting to get some recording done, starting to kind of get into it. But I was still on another show until the end of October. So started Tenet at the beginning of November, and we finished it when, Gary? Last June, middle of June.
That's true. Yeah, I read about it in the trades as well, and typically at that point, Richard and I start texting each other. Did you see this? Sending the article across, and I rarely get to read the script ahead of time. Richard sometimes does. So when I hear if he's got some inside information, again, I go to Richard, like, what do you know? And of course, he's held under NDAs and all that. But I don't typically see it until we start at the first temp, which is after Richard's been working on it for a number of weeks. It's not uncommon on Chris's films, while he's still in production, to get an email from the first assistant picture editor to say, hey, here's some dailies that Chris is concerned about, and to take an initial crack at those. And I collaborate pretty closely with our dialogue editor, Dave Bach, who's amazing. And we start to do some preliminary cleanup, but I don't have any picture to reference. I don't have anything. It's all, only, right off of Willie Burton's recorder on this one. And so I don't really see the film or know much about it until we get to that first temp.
That's incredible. Did it ever come up to you that I love this line in the film, which is don't try to understand it, feel it, which is a great kind of way to get into this film, which what are some of the things that Christopher does or doesn't do when it comes to giving you guys direction, if impressions of direction, or just overall things that he might have been thinking about for a long time?
I usually get a few comments beforehand, but the way we've always worked is I just start and begin on a scene that's important, or that the first scene I receive. And Chris has a look, and if there's feedback he wants to give me, he does. And so we kind of work like that. It's sort of like a audio-visual spotting session, where I'm running things by him, running ideas by him, and he guides the process. And so by the time we get to the first temp mix, which is probably our single biggest hurdle in the entire process of making one of his films, and the post-production side and sound post-production side. We have a grasp on all the issues. We feel like we have a language. We have a language for this film, and because we've done this back and forth. By the time we get to the temp for 2 or 3 months, so it's a excellent way to work because it allows me to input my ideas, but it gives Chris plenty of time to either agree or shoot them down or guide me in a different direction or suggest something that would be better. So it's allows him to react to something specific rather than to simply an idea that I'm floating.
Yeah.
Verbally.
What about for you, Gary? Because my understanding is like, well, what temp dub used to mean before is a little different than what temp dub means in terms of how you guys are working. What's your impression of this process? Why does it benefit how you guys collaborate?
Yeah, Chris's first temp mix is different than most other first temps for most other movies in that, first of all, I think he likes having the mixers come in cold, not having seen it at all, because I think he likes to see the initial reaction to it. It's kind of not that we're the first preview audience, but he gets to see immediately, like, even though we do have a lot of information that we're managing in front of us, he likes to see what our gut reaction is and, kind of proceed with that in mind. You certainly know, you get the idea of triage, what has to be addressed right away, and you get on it. And that first temp really winds up being the foundation for our entire final mix, and we are working progressively. Every mix that we do is based on the previous mix. We are not starting over at any point. Those days are long behind us. But it's really the first week of the final. The first temp is the first week of the final. And in this case, it was very peculiar because it was in, the second or third week of March that we did it. And right as the world is shutting down, we are in the critical phase of our creative process. And so we're wide-eyed for a variety of reasons. Not just are we looking at, a cinematic piece of mastery that is wildly complicated, but there's also a pandemic that nobody in the room has experienced before. We don't know what's happening. What we usually do with Temp 1 is that it's like a 9-day or a 10-day experience where we go through the whole film in the first 5, and then we take a look at it ourselves. We work on it for another 4, and then, he shows it to the studio at that point. But by the time we got to day 3, word was out that not only is the lot going to shut down, but the world is shutting down. And so, Chris directed us to kind of put the pedal to the metal and address, with the broadest of strokes to get through the end of that week. So at the end of Friday, regular working day Friday, we had a pass of the film and then basically went into shutdown.
That's incredible.
We got an 8-day temp done in 4 days, and
basically,
and Chris was really happy with it.
Yeah. In your mind, was it like the idea, like, oh, if we needed to, this would be a version? Like, was that ever a discussion? Like, oh, we have a version, or like it was just you guys had to stop and figure out the next step?
It was always going to continue, and we had set up. We had already kind of discussed methodologies. We had figured out a plan for working remotely from that next following Monday after we finished the temp on, or at least for the next until we could get back to the lot.
Yeah, it's been incredible to hear how everyone navigated that moment when they had to figure out the setup. I guess, Gary, you set up a mix in your home. Is that right?
Yeah, I've always been a home theater enthusiast. And so I've got a nice setup that I enjoy with the family at home, and quickly turned that around so that it was a much more of a, workable environment. I had always been able to do little things in there, but not anything quite like this. So I did a couple of quick upgrades. But we were within, Richard, when was Temp 2? Was it 2 weeks later? Maybe not even 2 weeks later that, there were already changes and there were already notes, and Chris was sending information as to what he wanted to have changed, and new music cues were coming in. And,
Life goes on.
So yeah, life goes on, and we figured out, we devised a plan. Tina collaborated, our post supervisor, and Richard started making changes from home to the effects mix. He would send me a stem. I would integrate that with updated music cues as well as updated dialogue and conforms, and all the editors were in on it, and I would put it all together into a single 5.1, send it out, and it was definitely screened in the Ross Theater. The Ross Theater is the Warner Brothers, premium screening room on the lot with 500 seats. You can social distance pretty well in that room. So Chris showed it to executives that were all in masks and spread out in the room. It went right from my theater right to the Ross Theater. And for a temp process, it worked incredibly well. He was really quite happy.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. It just shows that, just when you think you're out of luck or resources, there's always a backup plan that we can devise to keep the show must go on.
I don't think we missed a beat. Warner's engineering was great at getting everybody the equipment they needed and set up. They lent me enough gear that I could set up a little studio at home, 5.1 studio.
Nice.
Andrew Bach, who works with me, my assistant, he's really, I gotta think of a different title for Andrew because he's so much more than an assistant. He kind of, figured out the protocols, and so we just, the following Monday or Tuesday, took a couple of days to get everything set up. We were back editing.
That's great. I love the opening scene to every and all of Christopher Nolan's films, and this one is it's no letdown. It is an incredible just set piece. I'd love for you guys to talk about the transition of this tuning up of the opera, which, let me know if I'm wrong, but is there a sense of kind of like this, kind of what you did with a shepherd tone approach, where it just keeps building? What was kind of the mood, the tone? What were the elements of setting up this first scene with the opera house? Because to me, every time I watch it, I get so excited because it's visually and sonically just so, I don't know, it's intense.
And it's a great metaphor for the beginning of a film. Warming up. Everyone's getting ready, and Gary, you might have been better at this than I do, but it was production. There's a production track of orchestra tuning which they shot when they were there, and then Ludwig did a kind of a preamble to that and embellished it and kind of rounded it out. And those are the two elements, really, I think, right, Gary? Production.
Yeah, that's really it. And as we progressed into it, Ludwig's had some magical, I think there's a deep synth that's buried underneath there that just brought something unique to it. So it's mostly Ludwig stuff. I really hope, Michael, that you're able to get Ludwig to contribute to this if you can. He really has brought something special and something unique to the Chris Nolan mixes and the soundtracks that are going out with these movies. He really brought it. But by God, there's one thing that Chris Nolan likes: it's authenticity. That conductor tapping his baton on that stand, that's production. That is the sync recording of that baton tap. That is definitely something Chris likes, is authenticity.
I sent him 20 baton taps.
Nope.
And he didn't like any of them. And the one in production had noise behind it and everything, but Gary he cleaned it up and made it beautiful. And Yeah, and it's a perfect sound. It's a perfect sound.
That's amazing. Yeah, that first guitar hit from Ludwig's score, when it really drops, it's just like the brakes have come off, and we're following the protagonist like into something that we have no concept of yet of what it means, which to me is just the exciting aspect of the story. So the first reveal of that reverse bullet shot, I feel like in the opera, it's introducing some mechanics that I think you guys revisit throughout the film. But was that the first time that you guys had to figure out what the reverse bullet and how music was treated and just kind of the world for you guys?
Yeah, that opening sequence was the prologue, which was released in previous year, and so we mixed it in early December, and that was kind of the first test case for what later we were going to embellish and build upon, so we went through a lot of iterations of that and a lot of elements and tried different things, and there was a whole wide range of different approaches that we experimented with, and then I think finally settled upon the sort of best and simplest one that simply tells the story of where the bullet is at any given moment, whether it's in the gun or it's ricocheting or it's going through the guy, the SWAT vest. So yeah, that took quite a bit of time to get that right, because we really wanted to kind of nail something down and create something that we knew that we would be close to later, so that ultimately when the feature was released with that sequence in it, we wouldn't have deviated too much, And I think we did. It all evolved a bit, that whole concept of reverse entropy, and especially as related to guns.
Look away. We don't have to kill these people.
Because you really want the sequence of events to be clearly in reverse, but when you fire a gun forward, it all happens very fast. The mechanics, the bullet going off, bullet exiting the barrel. So we had to kind of pull those elements apart, or those sounds apart, and then reverse them or put them in the opposite order. And it was it was a great mind exercise trying to think inverted, trying to think inverted, but using forward sounds.
Exactly. Yeah. Is this another John Fasal special, or do you guys where do you guys go to record your guns? I mean, did you go back and do some new stuff, or is it stuff you have?
Yeah, we did. Yeah. Obviously, we didn't record them inverted, but we did mostly the guns for the battle scene in the end.
Okay.
We did a gun shoot with John and Eric Potter. We wanted a real kind of atmospheric feel to the guns. We wanted to go out to the set they were shooting at in the desert, but it didn't seem practical. And we have a really good range that we like to use that has canyons on three sides. It's kind of a box canyon. You're shooting into a box canyon, and within that box canyon, you can get all different kinds of and links of reverberations and echoes. So we did a lot of miking experiments, placing a lot of mics quite far away, 100 yards or 200 yards away, and to capture those reverberations.
That's great.
It needed to have that sound of a city environment,
Yeah. Oh, I forgot to mention too, Kevin O'Connell is the other re-recording mixer working along Gary. How did between the two of you break up? Who was responsible for what?
Kevin's great, and Kevin brought a really good energy to the mix. Having been, in every chair that there is to sit in, Kevin brought something special. He did all that back in the day, mixing jets on Top Gun, and I was tickled to find out that he would be collaborating with us. So he had the effects and the music, and I had dialogue. And but I will say that as a crew, it really is one of the most collaborative cruise between the three of us, Richard and Kevin and myself, where we are throwing ideas back and forth to each other all the time. So it really is, it's a collective, a really unique collective that I so appreciate that. I find after working on all these movies for all these years, that's when you get the best result is really when you're working with not too big of a group, but you're working with a tight group that really can get along well and has a natural shorthand. And we all have the same goal in mind. And especially when you've got somebody that's as smart as Chris guiding all of us and directing us through it, you get the best possible result.
I totally agree. It's great to collaborate with Gary. I love working with Gary and Kevin as well. And it all felt very as tense as it could be between, the pandemic and work stresses. We had a lot of fun, and we had it was a very creative, free flowing, we were always talking about ideas, and, Kevin's brilliant at what he does, and jumping back and forth between music and sound effects, and Gary's just the best. He's tenacious at digging out syllables and just cleaning up the dialogue, which is given the IMAX cameras and
and
all
the
the exterior locations.
Let's not forget the masks.
It's really challenging.
We'll do a whole master class on it. Absolutely.
Yeah, Gary's the mask guy.
Chris is the mask guy. I try to get it out of the mask.
Obviously, like, we introduced the reverse bullet, but then we really lean into it when we get to the firing range, which to me is just chills. It's that moment when the protagonist recognizes this is not what I expected. This obviously is something bigger than anyone could imagine. What was it like having the second chance of now really spending time being patient? Because the sound in that gun range to me is unique, and it has a special kind of approach to it too.
Yeah, well, again, we want to reverse engineer the events of firing a weapon, ending with almost like a punch in the hand as the bullet seats back into the shell casing in the gun.
Aim it and pull the trigger.
It's empty.
Aim it.
So it was about doing some reverse stuff. I think the ricochet, there was some reverse kind of high-end element that represented the bullet popping out of the wall. But it was, we kind of worked it until it felt right. And that's, another example of not overthinking it, just working and working and working until, that feels right. That feels like I'd imagine that would feel. As much as you can imagine it. That was the time where we really had to kind of orally explain what was happening, as well as the visual explains it. But we wanted to, make that as recognizable to people as possible. Exactly what the sequence of events were.
Yeah,
so recognizable, but at the same time having its own uniqueness. Where, I distinctly remember the mechanics of that gun, the actual workings of that gun, where you couldn't have it. The mechanics sound like it was going backwards. You wanted that to feel like it was actually functioning on your dimension, that it was actually moving forward. But the event of the bullet coming in backwards into a catch, that just watching that process come together was pretty special.
Right, because the gun's not inverted. The bullet was inverted.
Right.
So we were kind of, combining two ideas there into one little meal.
But what an opportunity, that Richard was presented with, to have basically the entire foundation of the movie summed up in one simple, what you think is a simple sound effect that winds up being one of the most complicated sound effects that you can do, something you're also familiar with as a gunshot at the movies, that actually you have to sell the idea of reverse entropy with that sound effect. round of applause for Richard on that.
When we get along and further along into the let me say this: the second viewing for me was really exciting because I wasn't focusing as much on story. I was just listening to the soundtrack. And something I noticed is when you guys are in the spotting stages, how was it to work with Ludwig this time? What was maybe different? What is spotting like on Tenet?
I've never worked with Ludwig before, so we kind of worked with him like we've always worked with Hans on Chris's films, in that we don't really communicate a lot. He does his thing and we do our thing. And, Chris doesn't want anybody to hold back. When I'm working on the film, when I'm pre-dubbing the sound effects, I don't play the music. I just play the sound effects. I pretend like that's going to be the movie. So because I want that effects field, I want that sound field to live fully and three-dimensionally and be able to stand on its own. We embellish it and change it and rethink things, through the course of the mix, of course. But when I go to the first day of the first temp dub, I want to present that as a three-dimensional world that can stand alone by itself without music. Ludwig's doing the same thing, I think. So that seems to be what Chris wants. He wants everybody to bring everything they got to the table, and he likes to keep hearing the world through the music. He doesn't like to kind of push it too far into the background. He likes to still feel that sense of reality and production and sound around you, sounds of the world. And Ludwig, his material was awesome. It was just so powerful, but also so could also be very transparent in a funny way. I mean, there are it's not thick, if you know what I mean. His work he did on Tenet was just driving and so exciting. And the first time we heard the music for the prologue, it was just knocked out.
Yeah,
so good.
Yeah, I found that Ludwig's music certainly had a breath to it. It had a set of lungs where it would certainly hit, and it would hit big, but then it would come back, and then it would hit back again, and then it would tuck back again. It would certainly it felt like its lungs were moving as we were going through it, and the dynamic translated incredibly well. And I think that's part of what allowed a lot of the sound effects as well as the dialogue to kind of coexist nicely. I know that there's between all the vehicles and weapons and screaming, to get all that to coexist is the inner workings of the mix sometimes can feel mundane. How do you get all these things to complement each other as best as possible? And that's part of the mix process. We're making all these decisions to try and figure out what communicates the story best, but what keeps the right level of energy and enthusiasm where we want it, and make it sound cool at the same time, as well as intelligible as possible. And Ludwig's material really had a naturally complementary element to it that allowed this coexistence of all these other elements.
That's great. It's something I'm interested to understand is, you've had a long relationship working with Alex Gibson, your music editor. And is there a certain, from what I could tell from listening to some of the interviews with Ludwig, is would he be delivering you guys stems or long pieces initially and then figuring out places where they go? Or was it the intentional kind of figuring out, set pieces of it? Like, yeah, I guess how much heavy lifting is Alex having to do to understand kind of how things are, the ebb and flow of things? Is it locked, or is it
a lot?
Interpretation?
No, a lot. Okay. He and Chris build from pieces. Ludwig is turning over stems, but he's also turning over individual tracks that Chris and Alex then layer and kind of build to Chris's liking. But no, Alex is all over it. He's
perfect. So we get out. I think there's big moment after big moment, but I feel like the bigger of the moments is the 747 scene, which to me is, once again, it just shows, I guess, how you guys are very intentional and articulate with what you're choosing to kind of present to the audience sonically.
Well, we've got this fairly long sequence with a 747 at full throttle, so we really needed to figure out ways to change perspective so we weren't in that intense sound field the whole time, and we could hear other things. Like when he turns the jet towards the hangar or the building, Chris wanted like a skid or like a sense of tires, rubbing on asphalt. So there are lots of little details like that. Gary got some group in there just after the crash itself. There needed to be details other than the jet engine. So it was really about first of all selling the jet is at full throttle by the time they leave it, they escape. But also to make it super intense and scary, but also find ways to carve out moments where you're a little bit back from it, where some of the jet's lower, or it's a different sound. When we're under the jet, it's kind of a deeper, boomier, scary sound because it's this enormous plane above you, rolling pretty fast with nobody in the cockpit. So, Chris just wanted to make this seem like a completely out of control situation, which they shot it practically. They shot it, with a real plane and a real building and real cars so as always in Chris's films with sound, we're just trying to keep up to the imagery because it's so, what he captures is so amazing and so impressive, silent. So, we've always got our work cut out for us, and we're not fixing things that need to be fixed. Like it happens sometimes. You're really striving because the benchmark is so high.
Yeah, Michael, I don't know if you got a chance to see the film in IMAX or not. I know
I didn't, unfortunately. I'm waiting to go back.
Yeah, that shot where the plane is coming at you and the nose of the plane comes as close as it does is absolutely stunning in IMAX. And for Chris, the IMAX release really is the premiere release. And so I think in his mind, at least I know I try to hang on to it. It's like, how is this going to feel when we're in IMAX? And I find that when you're in IMAX and you're doing a scene like that, no matter how big and loud you think the scene is, when you get to the IMAX theater and you see that proper projected image, you can't make it too big. You can't make it too overwhelming because that image really is powerful in IMAX. And so I think that playing that big of a dynamic and playing the perspectives within that dynamic is partially what makes that scene work. Whether they're opening the port on the plane and a different air is coming out of it, or whether it's the turning of the jet, or whether it's people outside as they're panicking, it's all these different, the specificity of some of the perspectives within that enormous dynamic, especially presented in the IMAX theater, really helps make that, the magnitude of that scene, what it is.
That's great. I feel like every time one of Chris's films comes out, there's no one who's quite making a film that fills a frame like he does visually. Visually it's incredible. The scale and size of everything is something that very few directors are able to do, and I think the task that you guys are presented with, to me, is just like, there's a reason why you guys have had such success, and from being recognized with Oscar awards and nominations, and to me, it stands out because he fundamentally understands sound, understands that it's just another, tool that he leans into. When this film was, we had the pandemic, and we were knowing that at some point this film is going to come out and it's going to be theatrically shown. Did you guys have to revisit your home, the streaming, or some of these other versions because there's such an emphasis on the fact that not many people are going to actually be able to experience it in theaters?
No, actually, the short answer to that is no. What's on the Blu-ray is the theatrical master. It's just how we've done it now since Dunkirk might have been the first one that we did that way. But Chris really wants people to experience it as close to the experience that they would get when they go to the cinema as possible. And part of that is getting the image right on either Blu-ray or 4K, or, he maximizes every format to make it look and sound as close to the cinema experience as possible. And so we only do a level compensation for home surrounds. But other than that, what's on the Blu-ray disc and what's on the 4K disc, as well as all the formats, like we don't do multiple masters. What's out there is what's out there. Some people like to do near field masters. Some directors really like that. They want to change it. Chris doesn't really want to change it. He wants it to be what he made for the cinema.
Yeah. Richard, for you, what do you find in terms of iterations or different movies with Chris? What's kind of consistent across all the films? What are things that he returns to fundamentally when you talk about the sub channel or the use of surrounds? What's kind of a signature thing that he does that's unique to him when it comes to the soundtrack?
Well, he wants he recognizes what sound can contribute, and so as a sound designer, as a sound editor, it's a feast working on his films. It's just the best. It's such an awesome opportunity because he really wants to hear things and really wants to hear sounds and really wants to hear unusual sounds. And so and he wants them to be powerful and visceral. And so sounds need to be big and bold and solid. And, there are times for subtlety as well, but the big scenes need to be huge. The scale needs to be huge. Visually, the scale is huge. Sound needs to live up to that. And I would say with him, he wants to avoid the expected and really try to find a new angle sonically for each sequence, and not just kind of, we're in a restaurant now, so it's got to sound like a restaurant. But just find some different take on the simplest things. And so again, for a sound person, it's fantastic because it really makes you exercise your mind in a way that you often aren't pressed to do. And it's just it's always have a fantastic time working on Chris's.
Were either of you involved with the 2018 unrestored version of 2001 when he went and did that project for the Cannes Film Festival?
Yeah, I was.
Okay, because something that was interesting going back and recognizing kind of some of the steps that have kind of, I think, or some of the things that he's said and shown, which is, I think when he went back and did this unrestored version, he said it was bold and experimental, which is one way of saying it was different for the time and really stood out to him even now that it was this very unexpected soundtrack. But what was your take of, when he went back and worked on 2001 and how that relates to his approach to understand of being experimental? Because I think experimental is not a word that people use often when it comes to the soundtrack.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was a wildly educational experience for me. I had never seen 2001 on a big screen. I mean, I had only seen it on TV. But they found an original, they found the original 6-track mags for the 70 millimeter masters that Kubrick had done. And the idea in, the unrestored version of it, or presenting the film as it was originally presented in 1960, was it 1968, 1969 that film came out? I mean, that was the whole goal, and sound, of course, had to fall in line with that. But of course, when you hang a piece of mag from 1968, it doesn't sound the same as when it played off of the mag player in 1968, because the physical medium has aged, and this one did not age particularly well. So we wanted to simply restore it back to its original form. And so we did that. There was a little bit of noise reduction done and a little bit of EQ done in the strict effort of getting it back to its original form in 68. But then we indeed played it back and took notes on it to make sure that it was really how Stanley wanted it, comparing it to notes that had been found from back in the day. And what I remember thinking after that playback with Chris on the dub stage of that mastered version, the cleaned up mastered version of 2001, is how similar it struck me the sensibilities and the choices were of that original mix compared to Chris's mix choices. You know, I hadn't seen that many Kubrick films in a movie theater over, the stretch of time, but when that radio frequency kicks in 2001, that the monolith is projecting, it's that high frequency, that high pitch and high frequency, how it increases over its duration, what that duration actually is before it cuts out and goes quiet. Like, it struck me that that's a choice that Chris would have made in one of his contemporary films. I was kind of astonished by it because in its proper reproduction of that mix, it is wildly loud. That is a very big and a very bold mix played back correctly. And it's very Nolan-esque, or dare I say, Nolan is very Kubrick-esque in that. And so, in 1968, to be able to have the gumption to play an element that big, that shocking for that long of a time, like a very bold choice. And great to look back on historically. And I can see some of the parallels in the choices that Chris is making even now. And some of the choices now are even considered provocative. That movie is too loud. That movie is too, the weight of it is almost too much. It's almost overwhelming. It may not be the first time that it's been done. And it's been done by some masters.
It's been interesting to kind of be just a bystander and see how the public reacts, how the community reacts. It's also interesting to then just get it from the horse's mouth when Chris comes out. One of the things that really was striking was when he was talking about Interstellar, he said it was a very, very radical mix. I was a little shocked to realize how conservative people are when it comes to sound, because you can make a film that looks like anything. You can shoot it on an iPhone. No one's going to complain. But if you mix the sound a certain way, or if you use certain sub frequencies, people get up in arms. So I think, a lot of times I would think that people would want to, not ask for permission, but there's a norm that is expected. And if you break that norm, you're breaking the rules, and you should, you're a bad filmmaker. And that to me is like fundamentally the wrong way of looking at this. So I'm curious.
I mean, look at theater, painting, music. I don't think people look at the film sound in the same way, and it is incredible how conservative people are as regards to that. They'll cut slack to any other art form, any other medium, but somehow film is I guess sort of like comfort food or something. It's a familiar thing, and people want it to be a certain way, and when it's not that certain way, it throws them. I go into a theater and sit down, and I'm thinking, floor me, take me somewhere I've never been before, and that's what Chris does, and so it's again, that's why it's so exciting and fun and challenging, and to work with him, because it's you're pushing boundaries.
That's the kind of filmmaker I would want to work for. Somebody that's willing to try things and put things out that haven't been done or aren't widely done. Do something really different. All this kind of echoes of Stravinsky, the Rite of Spring, you know, when that first performed, like people rioted. This is impossible. This is the worst thing ever. You know, it's like, yeah, guess what? It's 2021 and we still kind of talk about it, you know?
Right.
So
yeah, the thing that's kind of interesting is, you know, people when they talk about, you know, if you go into the rabbit hole of reading the internet comments and whatnot, people will say, oh, well, it's playing back 85, which is the standard. You know, that's what we want on, you know, on the Dolby scale at 7, that's 85. But why, you know, people still will come out and say, you know, well, we need to turn it down. This is not okay. And yet people are making decisions. It's like the filmmaker has made an intentional choice to do something. And someone at the final moment before the audience gets to experience it is saying, no, we actually think it should be another way, which I think is just, you know, when we talk about the, I think a lot of the feedback we've seen from Spielberg and Nolan and a lot of these other filmmakers when they're trying to protect the intention of the director, it's really interesting to see that it's really hard to control all these variables that are fundamentally out there when it comes to theatrical playback, which is how we want to watch these films.
Well, take any kind of controls off the cinema processor. Why is there a volume control on the cinema processor?
Yeah,
you know? They're remixing the film in the cinema on the fly, and then it probably stays there forever until somebody, you know, decides to turn it up or not.
There's a theory that says, you know, when the little old lady complains, you know, you give her money back. Don't turn the movie down for her. That affects
for everyone else.
Everybody, because that's not what the filmmaker made. The filmmaker made something so that it affects the audience, so that they feel something in a very particular, calculated way. You know, they spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of money to make it be what it is. And all it takes really is one person to say it's too loud, and then it comes down and the whole thing changes once you just give that person their money back and leave it for the rest of the world to appreciate for what it really is.
Sound people ought to holler more about this, because, you know, imagine if they had a control to dim the projector bulb or brighten the projector bulb. They'd be changing the DP's work and color temperature and everything. This is the same thing. It's exactly the same thing.
There's nothing better when I see an image posted online when someone's taken a photo of you know, a sign that's been put up at a theater and it says, this is how it's intended, like, you know, please, like, what, I forget what the verbiage is, but it's silly that someone that as an audience member, you have to be pre-warned that what you're about to experience is what the director intended, which, I mean, that is exciting to me. There's someone out there who is looking at it fundamentally differently and wants to present that. And Christopher Nolan is not a small director. He makes films that a lot of people see, and his films are commercially very successful. So I feel like it's just an interesting time and place for you guys and the industry as a whole. And I completely, you know, agree with what you're saying. It's too bad that sound is the one that's being scrutinized as the thing that we still as an audience member can control and change.
And all this being said, we don't try to make it too loud. We are very careful about, you know, if it hurts our ears, we turn it down. If we can't understand a line of dialogue, Gary makes it work. So it's not like we're. I think there's a lot of misinterpretation of Chris's intentions, and kind of jumping to the wrong conclusions. You know,
it's a lot of responsibility that you guys have to, like, you have to defend your work when in fact you're representing what Chris is wanting to do. So yeah, it's a hard place to be.
I think it's a small percentage of people that are saying this. Most of the comments I get are very positive.
Yeah.
You know? So I think it's a small vocal minority who have a valid opinion. It's their opinion, but you know, I don't think they're approaching the film and giving it a chance on its own merits. And I think a lot of people are jumping on without even having seen the film. That definitely occurred at the beginning when this was first released. I know people hadn't seen the film, and yet they were already complaining about it.
Oh Lord, yeah. I went into this with no previous knowledge of it, no trailer, no nothing, and you know, I watched it these 2 times, and I was just enamored by what was accomplished. I can understand if someone saw it in a theater and maybe a theater, it's always a discussion. Maybe the theater speaker's not calibrated. Maybe it's an old system. Maybe it's turned down. Like, we don't know, but yet it's unfair to come out and just say, this is wrong. It needs to be fixed. How dare you? Because it's fundamentally just, it's not how it should work when it comes to, a filmmaker's decisions and choices. Because I think he knows what he's doing by this point. I don't think we need to question whether he's conscious or not. Yeah. Anyway, case in point. Gosh, before we wrap up here, anything else anyone from your crew that you want to acknowledge? There's a handful of folks that worked on this. So, and obviously Kevin O'Connell is one of them. So yeah, who else?
Well, it was awesome to work with Jennifer Lame. First time working with her. She was a great presence on the stage. There were a limited number of people allowed on the dub stage because of COVID restrictions. So, we were like quarantining together really for those 2 months or so we were mixing. My crew was awesome. They rolled with the punches and, all went home and stayed where they were all working remotely through the mix. Just Andrew Bach was working with me at Warner Brothers. But awesome effects crew, awesome dialogue crew, Foley crew. Everybody was great. Working with Kevin was awesome. I've worked with Kevin before, and it's always a lot of fun. He's brings a great energy and great ideas, and always striving, like all of us. So as Gary has said, it was a very coherent, tight, fun bunch of people, and we were all. I think we were all happy to have something to distract us from the pandemic life for a couple of months.
That's true. It was really the best distraction possible. We kept working through it. God bless Chris and Emma for, encouraging us to go through. At the same time, they were very considerate for everything that was going on in the world and offered all kinds of accommodations and considerations for those that either didn't want to participate or wanted to participate in limited ways or what have you. We all were made to feel really comfortable to make those choices for ourselves. So I really want to show some props to Emma as well as Chris, as well as our post supervisor, Tina Anderson, for that. And I have to show super appreciation for our mix tech, Unsung Song, who is wildly smart, quick individual, supportive, and a key crew member as well. I gotta concur with that. Got to concur with that. All of that. Chris and Emma were great about
I want everybody. They wanted everyone to feel comfortable there, and if anyone didn't, we figured out a way for them to work remotely. And Unsung is. I forgot to mention Unsung. She was there, she had to be in a separate room, but it was a room that opened out onto the dub stage, so she could, I could just look at her and communicate, or Chris could, or anybody on the stage. And she's focused. She's right there. She spots problems as they occur, and is already on it before somebody mentions it. And the engineering staff at Warner Brothers who came in, and Tony Pilkington and
Kevin Collier,
Roy Murphy, and Kevin Collier, they kept the wheels on the bus, and it felt like a regular mix. It didn't feel like we were in any kind of weird, unusual circumstance, except that there was nobody else in the lot. But as far as our daily working routine, it was everyone involved just kept full speed ahead.
That's awesome.
I'd like to reiterate the privilege that it was to sit next to Kevin O'Connell for all those weeks. Where I come from, he's a legend in our business. And, we worked for years with Greg Landecker, and God bless him, he's happily retired. And, Kevin was a, student of Greg, as many years ago when he was coming up through the ranks. And so a real privilege to kind of have him and and collaborate, really, because there's a lot of insight to be to embrace, and a lot of education in that, and a lot of wisdom. And so I really appreciated this whole opportunity for this film.
Yeah, Kevin brings a wealth of knowledge and experience, and I think Chris appreciated that, and we all appreciated that, having Kevin on board.
You guys have a lot of smart people in one room, and it doesn't hurt that the story is so engaging. I will most likely go back and watch it again, because every time you go back, there's something else that comes out, and I think I'm excited. Well, maybe it will come out in theaters, maybe at some point in the future when we have a chance to return to theaters. I just feel like what a film to see on the big screen. So thank you guys both for spending this time. It's always a treat talking about what you guys are up to with Christopher Nolan. Hopefully, some people will come away with a few nuggets and a new perspective on the power of sound, because you guys throw some curveballs, which I think are always refreshing. And I just, it's so much fun to watch. So thank you both. Well,
when you watch the movie again and you have more questions for us, how did this happen? How did that happen? You text us and you let us know.
Exactly.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please feel free to subscribe to our audio podcast and YouTube channel, where you can find out about more upcoming topics and shows and projects that we'll be covering throughout the year. And if you like audio and you like podcasts, then I think you should check out the Audio Podcast Alliance. The goal behind the Audio Podcast Alliance is to help bring more great sound stories out into the community. So definitely check out some of these shows, subscribe, and you can find out more information about some of the great stories being created about sound.